Okay, bringing us home today, we have HyTerra, ASX code HYT, and they have a market cap of just around 10 million. HyTerra is focused on pioneering the exploration and production of natural hydrogen. And a warm welcome to HyTerra Executive Director and Chief Technical Officer, Avon McIntyre. Welcome.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks everybody for joining today. This is our first time on Share Cafe, so we're going to be taking it from the top, and we're going to be showing our investor pack. It's probably our last outing for this investor pack because we've got some big updates coming for the company, but this will give a decent overview of what we're up to. So we are in a very small club. We are natural hydrogen explorers. We're effectively a startup. We relisted last year, December, and our job is to explore for hydrogen in the subsurface. So what I'm going to be talking about mainly today is our project area called the Nemaha High or Nemaha Ridge in Kansas, which is an emerging hotspot for hydrogen exploration, where hydrogen has been observed in the subsurface for many years. And now the market conditions have changed, and with more awareness and interest in hydrogen, this is becoming a bit of an area where people are going, this could be something major. So just pop to the next slide, thanks, Paul, and we'll just blast through this so that people can read at their leisure. As I said, we're a very, very small market cap. We have two projects. We have one in Geneva. We have a working interest as non-operated partner in a well that's been drilled there and is undergoing flow testing. It's got some technical issues at the moment, but we've learned an awful lot about hydrogen in the subsurface from that area. We're operating in the USA because hydrogen is very tricky stuff to store and transport. So if you can find it next to existing customers or existing infrastructure, that's a great thing to have nearby. We're leasing and accelerating our exploration activities next to and including existing hydrogen occurrences where wells have been drilled in the past and hydrogen has been recovered from those wells in interesting quantities. We'll get that onto that shortly. And then we're maturing quickly. We want to get holes in the ground as soon as possible to actually determine resource potential and size. Just press on, thanks. Very, very quickly run through the team. So Ben and I are the EDs. Ben and I are both ex-Shell. We left Shell within the last 2 years because of the excitement and the potential we see in subsurface hydrogen. We see it as kind of like the lithium equivalent for the energy industry as it was for mining, for hydrogen. So that's our motivation and driver there. If we just press on, thanks. So there's lots of noise around hydrogen in recent years, and there's talk about grey hydrogen and blue hydrogen and green hydrogen and so forth. Most of these are manufactured. Hydrogen is generally made from natural gas at the site you need the hydrogen, where you create a lot of CO2 to produce the hydrogen, or alternatively use electricity and you electrolyze it. It takes up a lot of real estate cost and time. Whereas natural hydrogen, if we can find it in the subsurface, it removes all that manufacturing requirement. We just have a very small footprint and it comes out of the ground and meets you at the wellhead. It's a bit like the oil and gas industry was 150 years ago, where people thought oil come from whales. Why on earth are you drilling in the earth for it? But look where we are today. So having said that, natural hydrogen has been observed in many places around the world, but there's never been the incentive to develop and commercialize it. And also the associated gases with it in those places were often more valuable until recent times. So people are really turning their attention back to this now. Next one, thanks. So the idea is we want to rapidly build a profitable natural hydrogen business that not only benefits people economically, but also environmentally, and create a better future for customers and societies. We want to do this close to customers as possible, and we want it 24/7, unlike the green hydrogen, for instance, which is relying on wind and sun to be shining to generate that hydrogen. And we think the Midwest of the USA is the right place to get started on this because of the things I mentioned earlier. You've got great geology, you've got great regulatory system, support of government, and you've got off-takers nearby. And if we can crack it there, we can replicate elsewhere. This is thoughts that are shared by some of the people way up the food chain in BP. Here's a quote from someone earlier this year in BP saying that they see hydrogen as being something that will roll out in isolated geographical locations close to the end users with low transport costs. So we completely agree. So that fits that mantra. Just next one, thanks. So here's a snapshot of the project we listed on late last year. It's a very small percentage, only 15% working interest in this dedicated hydrogen exploration well in Nebraska. Hydrogen has been observed during drilling and swab testing. We, with the operator, installed a pump earlier this year to dewater the well. That pump's failed. We're just waiting on the operator to come up with a plan as to how we're going to fix this and move on. But we've learned a lot, and subsequent from listing, we turned our attention to the surrounding states. Next slide, please. We mapped up hydrogen occurrences around the USA, and that's what those green circles are against the gravity map of the USA. We discovered there's over 1,000 hydrogen occurrences across 35 states observed in the USA. These are wells that have actually seen hydrogen. And we noticed that in Kansas, there's a big cluster of really encouraging hydrogen shows there, at least 10 of them. And so that is on the Nemaha Ridge, which is where our new leases are. So in the next slide, we'll show what it's like on the surface. So Kansas is Midwest industrial state. We've been mapping out all the various offtake options in that area. There's great infrastructure in terms of pipelines, roads, electricity, energy generation. And one of the great things about hydrogen is not only is it an energy source, it's also a chemical feedstock for ammonia or methanol. There's just so many options. If you locate it in a place like this, is what you can actually do with it. And we've got a study underway trying to work out what is actually the best option for it out of the multiple good options we have. Also in the USA, there's tax credits available for clean hydrogen. And so that is a reason why many companies are shifting their focus to the USA to give their projects a bit of a boost. On the next slide, we'll start digging into exactly what we're looking at in here. So we've been leasing in 3 counties in Kansas, and I've got some wells shown there on the map. A couple of these wells, the Scott well, drilled in 1982, it recovered up to 56% hydrogen in that well. And there's another well which recovered up to 92%. And what we have done is we've actually gone and acquired the mineral leases for at least those 2 wells, and at least a couple more wells which we know have observed hydrogen, but we don't know what the percentage exactly was. It wasn't recorded properly. So what we are looking to do is to explore adjacent to those historic occurrences. We don't think they drilled deep enough. People were looking for oil and targeted the oil-bearing rocks there, but the hydrogen we predict would be reservoired at a deeper level within those wells. You can see gas pipelines snaking through the area. There's coal-fired power stations nearby which are looking to clean themselves up, military bases and so forth. So there's just so many offtake options there. It's a great place to be. The following slide shows us a bit of our funnel of opportunities. So we're screening a lot of the globe for where we think subsurface hydrogen could be located. And you can see our Project Geneva test there is at the execution phase, and we're rapidly moving the Nemaha Ridge project through to permitted well sites. We released an announcement a couple of weeks ago which says that we are operationally ready to drill, subject to funding. So it's our intention to get holes in the ground as soon as we can get that organised. The following slide just shows a bit more about the Nemaha Ridge. Just press on. So here's a cross-section of the subsurface. And so what's the magic here is we have this thing called the Mid-Continent Rift. It's a failed rift, which basically means it's full of very iron-rich rocks, and it's a giant hydrogen factory. as water passes through this mid-continent rift and reacts with the iron-rich rocks, hydrogen is generated. And as a nice geographical accident, the Nemaha Ridge is sitting right next to the western flank of that mid-continent rift. And so hydrogen, the idea is the hydrogen naturally migrates and is focused onto the crest of the Nemaha Ridge. And that's where the 10 historic hydrogen occurrences all are located. So it all checks out in terms of a predictive model. The next step for us is to actually get a bit more resolution on the crest of the Nemaha Ridge to identify traps and targets so we can place drill bits in the right place. A few months ago, we acquired a gravity mag survey, which allowed us to get a good idea of the subsurface in that area, and has started to define some prospective regions, which we will then follow up for drilling candidates once we mature them a bit further. And as we move on, we are looking at some of the detail in here. There are a few wells in the area, and so we've been able to go through and work out what the various reservoir and seal pairs are that we would be chasing. You can see here that there's basement rocks in yellow, and then we've got this sedimentary cover over the top, which is where we think the hydrogen is likely to be located. We've picked up multiple wells in this area, which are historical leases, and you can see some of them just didn't drill deep enough, particularly the one on the right, which would be a good candidate for an early drilling target. So there's lots of play diversity here. There's hydrogen has been observed in the basement rocks themselves, so that's another target. And there's multiple layers in which the hydrogen or other gases could be trapped in the area. One of the great things about this area is that it's right on the fringes of a petroleum system, so we don't get overwhelmed by oil or natural gas. If any gases are found, they're usually hydrogen and nitrogen, and so it's relatively clean from that perspective. And I think on the final slide here, we've got a picture of some of the, this is a basement map on the Nemaha Ridge, just showing some of the lumps and bumps we've been starting to map up and put these historical occurrences into some sort of geological context so that we can high grade our drilling portfolio. And this has been upgraded subsequently, or being upgraded subsequently with our GravMag survey to really narrow down on drillable targets. I think we're just about there. Thanks, Paul. Yeah, so here's a quote from the USGS saying on this subject that this is very much on their radar. The USGS and the Colorado School of Mines have recently set up a research consortium to throw serious grey matter and money at this problem and try and work out how they can assist industry in this area. So ourselves and a few other companies are involved with these research organizations, trying to put all the pieces together so to make sure we do look in the right place with the right tools. I think that's probably about time, and I'll park it there. Oh, apart from the timeline, yeah, this presentation is from May, so we're now at the right-hand side of this chart. We're on track. In fact, we're probably going to blast through all of these activities, and as I said earlier, we're ready to drill within a few weeks of securing funding. So that's the next step. Thanks for your time.
So Avon, just a couple of questions that have come in. We'll start with the first one. What is the size of the current market for hydrogen close to the property? What kind of infrastructure that do you need to create? If you can elaborate a little bit on that.
Yeah, thanks. Well, one of the curious things about hydrogen, there is no sort of market like you have for other commodities, because it's generally generated at the location it's needed. So generally the most obvious thing to do with hydrogen, if you find it, would be to make an ammonia plant. 2/3 of the cost of ammonia plant is actually traditionally in the steam methane reformation plant, which is what actually makes the hydrogen from natural gas. So if you actually locate an occurrence of natural hydrogen and you can get it up to sort of that that size of an ammonia plant, well, then the cost of the ammonia plant drops by 2/3 because you only have to build the final reaction part. So we've got to be careful about forward-looking statements, but we've engaged a company to generate all these economic models for us. And so upon discovering a contingent resource or contingent reserve, then we can actually start to quantify those numbers. But we've got metrics in place where we know what we need to find in order to be in economic development.
Okay, great. And another question that's come through. What are the impurities associated with hydrogen from the ground, and how do you purify it?
Yeah, good question. So it's always hydrogen is usually found in a mixture of gases when it is encountered in the subsurface. In this particular location, the overwhelming majority of the gases are hydrogen and nitrogen. And so what we are looking at doing is looking at a series of membrane technologies, either downhole or at surface, so that we can go straight to the right gas from the wellbore without having to deal too much with the associated gases, particularly if we can do it downhole. But if those other gases have value, then that's something we would absolutely look at. We're not too far from the Hugoton helium area, which is in the west of Kansas. And some of these historical occurrences have actually seen up to 2% helium in the wells as well. So we just take a wait and see approach there. We look at it as the cream on the top, but we're hydrogen explorers.
Okay, great. And I mean, can you sort of tell us a little bit about why natural hydrogen hasn't really got much of a following or much of a hearing up until this point? It seems to be a relative newcomer to the hydrogen story. Well, why is that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. A lot of the time, it's difficult to really understand the process as to where it's coming from. So, and also there's been a problem in the past where the gas sampling and analysis used hydrogen as a carrier gas in the gas chromatography process. So what happened was people would collect gas samples, run them through the gas chromatograph, and then extract hydrogen from the balance, because that was from the carrier gas, you see, not realizing that there probably could have been gas actually in the mixture they had located. One of the problems we have with hydrogen is super reactive gas. And so a lot of the time, by the time it gets to the surface, it's already actually transformed into something else. And that could be water or methane or something else like that. And so one of the great things about Kansas is that, as I was saying earlier, we're not in a petroleum system here. We're on the edges of it or just beyond. So we don't have those other contaminants coming in. So for instance, the Scott well, which you can see over my shoulder here, the wellhead's still at the surface. It's been there for 40 years. And every few years, the folks from the Kansas Geological Survey go along and open up the valves, take another sample, and it still consistently stays at, somewhere between 20 and 60% hydrogen every time they sample it. So there's some process of replenishment going on there. But generally speaking, people just weren't looking for hydrogen. You tend not to find it in the places you would find oil and gas. Your hydrocarbon systems are much more aggressive, and they would overwhelm a hydrogen generation system where they're located. So we see it as being the thing to look for in places where people have given up looking for oil and gas because there was no active system there.
Right, understood. Okay, and what about? There's a couple of questions here on who you see as the likely users or off-takers of the hydrogen once you're in production. Who are the ones that you can sort of see into the future will be the obvious ones?
Yeah, so I can only really talk about that in terms of Kansas, because where you are in the world would make a big difference, right? So we're in the Midwest. It's the food bowl of America. And so in this particular location, we think the best use is to turn it into ammonia straight away. that's generating value at the wellhead. You also, to make ammonia, the next step is urea fertilizer. You need nitrogen for that as well. We've got plenty of that. Or alternatively, you can turn to methanol, and then that would also have a high value commercial use. And one of the great things about methanol, I should say, is if you can find a local CO2 source who wants to get rid of some CO2, you blend that in with your hydrogen, and it's actually a hydrogen sink. So there's credits available for that sort of thing. Depending on where you are in the world, it's going to always be a slightly different story. There's something called the hydrogen ladder, which is worth looking up. And the hydrogen ladder is something where people have done studies and they say, what is the cheapest and easiest and most profitable thing to do with hydrogen? And it starts off at ammonia and works its all the way down to something like aviation, I think it is. So chemical feedstocks is your quick and easy path to profitability, and you eventually get down to more energy sources. Of course, everybody's very, very excited about the energy side of things, but that requires a lot more infrastructure and distribution networks and storage and transport availabilities that don't always exist to that level yet. One of the things that we want to do is we want to be an enabler for our green hydrogen friends. They're doing solar and wind and so forth. You know, we want them to be successful. We want them to be nearby. They will help build the pipelines and the storage and the offtake sort of paths to value and so forth. And we can come along if that's the right thing to do and just be that 24/7 demand supplier right there to supplement that.
Okay, great. And I'll just finish it up with just one last quick question, and that is, what's the next bit of news that investors and shareholders should be looking for from HyTerra?
I think the next announcement, and as I got to be careful about this, is subject to funding, would be probably would be spudding a well.
Right. And you know, sort of what sort of time frame are we looking at for that?
Once funding's in place, we can have the drill bit turning within about 2 to 4 weeks.
Right. All right, understood. Avon, thank you very much for that. That's a really interesting development on the hydrogen side. I think that brings today's webinar to a close. So thank you to our presenters today. We will be back next Friday with another Hidden Gems webinar. Thanks for tuning in, and have a great weekend, everybody.